Hello friends, it's Cassie and welcome back for another video here on my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be showing the Simon Says Stamp Garden Greetings. This is the July 2021 kit. It is sold out, but I'll have everything that's still available linked down below. So let's go ahead and talk about what comes in this kit. You're going to get this amazing mesh zipper pouch that measures about 12 3/4 by 10 inches. It's awesome. I hope they sell it individually. I haven't looked yet. And pretty standard, you're going to get a piece of candy. Gotta have candy while you're crafting, right? You're also going to be getting the Simon Says Stamp ORCA Sequins. They are gorgeous. You'll be getting the Simon Says Stamp Dot Runner and refills, and my consensus is that thing is pretty good. You're also going to be getting the SCRIPTY Hugs die. You'll get a coupon code, and I'll have that down below as well. You're going to get 2 A2 envelopes in white and in cotton candy. You'll get the Simon Says Stamp 4.5 by 6.5 inch Blossom Field embossing folder, and it is a thick one. We'll talk about that more when we get to it. We're also going to get the PinkFresh Studios Super Cool Mini Puff Alpha stickers. You're going to get 6 pieces of the 6x6 Paper Rose Forever. This stuff is quite pretty. I love the color palette that we're working with. The stamp set is the Garden Greetings 6x8 stamp set. A lot of great sentiments and some really whimsical florals. You'll get your idea sheet, and then you're going to get 4 pieces of cardstock, one in Neenah, 110 pound, cotton candy, smoke, and black. Jumping into our first 2 cards, I actually took the smoke cardstock and I'm going to cut that down to make some small thank yous. If you followed me at all, you know that my daughter is getting married, so I have been trying to come up with the idea of some thank yous that I could make for her, because I will be making the invitations and the thank yous. And so I have a 4-bar. A 4-bar measures 7 inches by 4 7/8 and then scored at 3.5. And then this square one is just a 4.25 by 4.25. So it was 4.25 by 8.5, scored at 4.25. So we're going to start with our square one, and I'm pulling out one of the little swags. I'm going to ink this up with some Simon Hurley Create Game Over ink. It's a beautiful, like, dark red burgundy type ink, which is actually their colors, so it works perfect. So I'll stamp that a couple times to make sure I have a nice crisp image, and then I'm just going to flip it. I'll flip it, and then I will stamp it again, and then we'll have this beautiful swag that goes all around. You could just use the wreath of swag in there if you wanted to, but I chose to do it this way. And then I'm going to line up the thank you in the center, and I start with black. So I've got that VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. It's a nice crisp black, and I don't love it. So I stamp it a couple times hoping it'll really pop, but it just doesn't, not with that gray background. So I'm going to try something I've never tried before. I'll clean off my stamp really, really well, and then I'm going to use a magic powder bag over the top, sweep away the excess, and then I'm going to grab that Simon Says Stamp Clear Embossing ink, and I'm going to try embossing this in white right over the top of what I just stamped. This is where the Misty comes in super handy. I'm not sure if it's going to completely cover it, but we'll try. I'll cover that with that white embossing powder. So far, so good. And then I heat set it, and it works perfectly. That whole combination was fine. So I was able to cover the black and have none of it showing through. I was so happy with that. The only downside to the heat embossing is that it does warp your paper, so you would have to put it under something, heavy for a little while. Now I'll do the 4-bar, and I'll ink up the swag just at the bottom, and I'm going to do some embossing on this. I have an embossing powder by WOW. This one's called the Metaline Himalayan Musk. It's really pretty. It does look metallic. It's a burgundy color, and when you kind of shift it in the light, it just, I don't know, it kind of changes colors, does a little bit of a shift to it. So it's really, really pretty. I'm not sure if I like that better than just using the burgundy, but it is very pretty. So then we'll stamp thank you, doing the same process, and I'm going to heat emboss that with the white embossing powder. That's the Brutus Monroe Alabaster White. Heat set that till that is smooth and melted. And then I do want to embellish this, so I'm going to pull out those ORCA sequins, and I'm going to be pretty liberal putting those all around. I will say if I had to make a bunch of thank yous like this, that would get a little bit monotonous, but if you only have to make 50 to 100, you're okay. All right, so there are 2 thank yous, quick little cards, and I do like how they turned out. Card number 3 might be my favorite. I have a piece of pink cardstock, and then I cut out these strips from the patterned paper. It just worked perfectly. Again, we're doing weddings around this house, so this one just kind of spoke to my heart. So that panel was cut down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, so the full front of an A2 size card. I'm going to take the wreath stamp, and I'll line that up in my Mini Misty, and I'm going to ink that up again with that Game Over ink. I just love the way that looked on the smoke cardstock, so I think on this cotton candy it's going to look just as pretty. And it does. So I'm going to stamp it a couple times, make sure that it is nice and crisp, and then I'm going to bring in the embossing folder. Now this embossing folder I found was a little thicker than I was used to, so you're going to have to follow your manufacturer's instructions, but I ended up having to do my own thing because I couldn't use my embossing plate, which usually goes for 3D embossing folders, even though this isn't a 3D embossing folder. And I couldn't do the regular thing I would normally do with my embossing folders. So what I did was I took my platform, 2 pieces of regular cardstock on top of each other, and then my embossing folder, and ran that through my die cutting machine to actually get it to work. And it did fine that way, but you know, you kind of have to play around. Just don't break your machine is all I'm saying, because this baby is thick, which that's how my kids would say it, which is a compliment. So she thick. All right, I am now just going to take some more of that Game Over ink and a blending brush and blend it around the edges. I just love how that picks up some of that texture from the embossing folder and kind of makes it a little darker in those areas. But you know, if you're thinking something's missing, try blending on the edges just to see, and that usually for me does it. Like I'm like, ooh, okay, that's what it needed. I like that. Or splatter. Splatter's always a winner too. But I'm happy with how that looks, and so now I'll grab out some foam squares and put that on the back of our little Mr. and Mrs. I may just use this one to give to my daughter when she gets married, because this is their colors. It's perfect. And then put that right in the center. And then we'll take the congratulations, and I will put 2 small ones on that far left-hand side, and then I'll use a little bit of liquid glue for the rest of it. I kind of forgot that I had the dot runner until after I used the liquid glue. So I'll use that, and then I'll pull out the dot runner. And typically I don't really like to use tape like this, just because I find that my cards don't always stay together, but I think this stuff might work. It seems to hold pretty well, and I also like liquid glue, especially when attaching a panel down to a card base, because it gives me a little bit of wiggle room. So now we'll take some more of that liquid glue and our Trinity Stamps Picket stick and put down some more of those ORCA sequins, and that'll finish off card number 3. Really love how that one turned out. For card number 4, we're going to pull out those puffy stickers, and I am going to spell out my own sentiment. So I like these. They kind of remind me of like those little marquee signs, and so it just kind of neat because they're dimensional, but they're also that white. I don't know, it's just cool. So I've got my piece of black cardstock that I've cut down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And I guess I was thinking I was going to do it this way, so I pulled out my first letter. I'm using my T ruler to make sure everything's lined up correctly, and then I realized the sentiment that I want to put down is going to be way too long to do it this way. So I flip it landscape, and we'll start over with that process. Now, I'm not going to show you the whole process of putting these letters down because my head is in the way for probably 90% of it, and my hair's wild today. So I'll show you a few of the letters, but I'm basically just trying to line those up, and I'm using that Trinity Stamps Picket stick and moving and manipulating the letters as necessary. So we're going to put thinking of you, and you know, it's kind of funny working backwards like that, which is the way I found was easiest to do it. You really do have to think about how you're spelling stuff, and if that is an issue for you, I highly suggest you write it on paper first, so that way you can look that way. I did it from my head and it worked, but I really did have to think about that. We take that for granted. All right, so just sticking those letters down and manipulating those a little bit. I really love how that turned out. So the next thing I want to do is stamp onto this patterned paper. It's so pretty, and I'll take this long floral stamp, and we're going to stamp that on there. And we're going to emboss it, actually. So I'll use my magic powder bag over the top of that just to make sure that powder isn't going to stick where I don't want it. And then we'll ink that up with that Simon Says Stamp Clear embossing ink, and stamp it, and then cover that with that alabaster white embossing powder. and the magic powder bag did a great job of making sure that powder didn't stick where it wasn't supposed to. So now we'll just heat set that. And I wasn't sure at first if I wanted to just cut this out as a strip or trim around it, and I end up deciding to fussy cut one side and see how that looks. And I'm finding I actually really love the idea of fussy cutting around the entire thing, which it takes zero effort. By fussy cutting around it, I mean I'm just kind of barely going around it. And then we've got that piece ready. And again, I forgot about the dot runner because I'm so used to using liquid glue that I was like, oh, whoops, forgot to use it. So I'll just use my liquid glue for this piece. And then I will use the runner, the tape runner, for this piece. And it works great. So if you are in the market for a tape runner or you like that better, this is a very decent one. I don't have a lot to compare it to, only ones I've used in the far past. And I would say that I like this one. All right, so next step, I plan to do some stamping on the inside of my card. I did end up making a mess of it, but I fix it. That's the beauty of showing you this. We all make mistakes, and oftentimes you can work around it. You might even discover something that you like better. So I'm going to ink up this big long stamp with that Game Over ink, stamp that down. And this is in my MISTI, and then I'm going to shift it. The problem was that I did have a little ink on that gets transferred, and then I dropped my ink pad. And I'm like, meh, what are you going to do, right? So I'll stamp that down. We're not going to scrap this. We'll just work with it. It is what it is. There is, as a friend of mine says, as Carrie Rhodes says, there is no stress in stamping. And she's right. We're here to have fun. So I'll take a couple pieces of scrap cardstock, the pattern paper, and I will stick this down just over the top of that, and I think it works just fine. And then it adds this other little element that I wouldn't have normally put in there, but I really like. All right, so I'll tack those down with the dot runner. I'm remembering to use it. And then this one, I'm going to make it a little shorter because I don't want those to be the exact same size, but that covers it. All right, now we'll close that up, and then we'll tack down our card panel to our card base using the dot runner. And when I do use it, I make sure to get it all the way around the edges and then a little bit on this center. And then as a final bit of embellishment, I pull out some of those clear ORCA sequins and put those down. And that'll finish off card number 4. Those puffy stickers are so fun. All right, so as we head into card number 5, funny thing about card number 5, I thought I was recording. Turns out I wasn't. I was actually chatting with my son, who's still in Poland, over FaceTime, and thought I was recording the whole time, but I wasn't. So let's talk a little bit about this card. As you can see, this is a slimline card, so I went ahead and stamped the swag on the left-hand side of my panel, and then Copic colored all of the pieces inside. I die cut the word hugs from the die cut that came in the kit 4 times out of some of the pink cardstock, and then layered that on top of some black cardstock, and then I heat embossed the words "because I miss you" and "so very much." To make it even easier to layer up the word hugs, I ran that through my Xyron sticker maker before I die cut them out, and then I was able to stick those on top of each other. And then, of course, finished it off with some more of those ORCA sequins. So I do really like the way this one turned out. Just wish I could have showed it to you. All right, and that finishes off all the cards. Let's go ahead and take a look at all the cards that I made for you today. I would love to know which one was your favorite. If you did have any favorites, go ahead and leave that down in the comment section down below. As I say every time, that's my favorite part of making these, is seeing which ones you guys like the best. So if you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And as always, I will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.